Today, let's say this is a starting point. So a starting point in terms of the next step afterwards, we will definitely learn what this data can also be used for in addition, not just for autonomous vehicles. There can be also many more applications supporting blind people, for example, walking downtown, whatever.
We have right now customers who are geospatial data aggregators, mapping companies, the guys who are quite large and they generate map or navigation APIs for end users to use it. $1 billion revenue plus per year.
Welcome to Fully Diluted, our enterprise team's podcast. We're joined here today with Ali and Ulrik. They're the core contributors of Natix. Natix is been leveraging cameras and other devices to provide basically mapping and visual intelligence products. We're also joined by Kinji, our usual enterprise host for Fully Diluted. Without further ado, we'll just get started. So just be great to hear a high-level overview of Natix, basically the story behind it and why you guys are working on it.
Sure. So I'm Ali, as you said, one of the core contributors and founders of Natix. Background, I studied wireless communication. I have a PhD in the field. Actually, my specialization was localization algorithms and location-enabled services. So, started my career in the autonomous driving industry, building what we called local dynamic maps and high precision location engines for cars. Funnily, that's when I met Ulrich. This was like back in 2013, and he was working on Ibeo. He's the founder of Ibeo, one of the largest LiDAR companies globally and in Europe. And he basically sat me down in this Volkswagen equipped with a bunch of LiDARs, and we went around the university campus. And back in 2013, this car was driving by itself, which was insane. There was just a developer with his laptop sitting on the passenger seat and us in the back seat. So anyway, I fell in love. 2020, we started Natix. Natix has started as a computer vision AI company, and our core business was to build AI that is optimized to run on edge devices. So devices with minimal computational power, which means your smartphone or the camera itself, essentially where the data is being generated. 2 years down the line, we had a few products working mainly with CCTV cameras. We decided to pivot into Natix Network, the idea that you see today. And the reason for that is we realized camera is the king of sensors. I just saw the Escape Velocity guys actually quoted this because it's a commonly available sensor. It's extremely cost effective. And together with computer vision AI, you can really do wonders with this device. That's why Tesla has been betting on cameras for going basically to have something scalable for environmental perception. And that's why we were very bullish on this device. And we said, okay, we want to build the largest camera infrastructure in the world without owning a single camera, the same way that Uber has the largest taxi network in the world without owning a single taxi. And funnily enough, we are quite crypto and deepen native even before starting Natix. And we said, okay, deepen was not a term back in the time. So we said we want to create the helium for smart cameras. That's how actually Natix Network started. For a while, this was our tagline. First product that we started was DriveVan. It's a smartphone application. You just download the app, you put it on the dashboard of your car, you drive around. The AI actually works on your smartphone, on the AI chip of your smartphone to, as you said, Dylan, to map the world or collect dynamic map information like traffic signs, road distress, potholes, and so on. And you earn reward. It has navigation, it has dash cam, it's a gamified user experience. And we just launched a new product, which is VX360. It's a little box that any Tesla owner can just purchase. They can plug it into their glove box, into the USB-A port of their glove box. And this device basically captures 360 video data from the entire trip of the user. And you as a user not just earn reward, but you can also access and manage your entire trip, the dash cam footage, as well as the Sentry mode in case you honk or a sudden brake and so on. You can access all of these footages very easily via your smartphone. Yeah, so this is our story and how we started. Maybe Ulrich can also say, because Ulrich has joined us hands-on since around a year right now, a little bit less than a year. And he's the reason we went the direction of VX360 as well, because VX360 is not just for mapping, is also for autonomous driving. And I think Ulrich has been a guy working for and with autonomous driving at the edge of it for over 20 years. So I let him also explain his background and his journey with us.
Yeah, thank you, Ali. So actually, I did my PhD in cooperation with Volkswagen and Audi on collision avoidance of autonomous vehicles in the late 90s. I added a Bachelor of Business Administration in Switzerland and a Master in the US. So I have this technical background and the financial background, and I fell in love with autonomous driving and especially with LiDAR. And therefore, I founded this LiDAR company, IBEO. And when I met Ali, we have been working on finding solutions for testing and validating autonomously driving vehicles for almost a decade. And when I met Ali, I recognized, wow, that's cool, because now we can bring together a huge community which can collect a lot of data which we need for validating these systems. And on the other hand, I'm in this automotive market, and we can bring together the automotive processing of all this video stuff with this huge amount of data, which will enable companies working on autonomous driving, or also car makers working on driver assistant applications, to reduce significantly their development time, because getting ground truth data will be much more easy by this combined approach.
Very cool. Yeah, so I kind of want to start off. I know a lot of our listeners are familiar with Hive Mapper. They use like a physical device to collect mapping data. You guys have prioritized using your phone, more of a software-based approach. Why make that choice, and how do you kind of think about the trade-offs between them?
Why did we go smartphone? I mean, we as a company, we still have we are still very bullish on commodity hardware. I mean, this was a term, by the way, tagged or coined by Borderless guys. You can call it bring your own hardware, commodity hardware, tapping into existing hardware, right? VX360 is, by the way, another version of that, because if you wanted to build a 360 camera, it would have been the retail price, even the cost of it would have been a few $1,000s for us. And then imagine we need to also add in the logistics and all of these things, which will add up to that until it becomes something usable by the end user. So why did we choose a smartphone? Because smartphone has pretty much everything you need that a normal dash cam also has. It has GPS, it has a communication module, it even has a display for you to let's say interact with the user. It has a very, very good camera. And if you look at the OGs of mapping, we're talking mapillary or street level imagery, mapillary, grab, they also have a smartphone app essentially in their stack. They do the entire range. So they have from smartphone to dash cam to even 360 high fidelity data collection, which is these very expensive cars or devices, but they have it for the entire stack, because a smartphone is very much scalable. I think numbers show for ourselves, for speak basically for us as well. But yeah, smartphone is extremely scalable. It has all of the sensors that we need. It has the computation power that we need. And that's why we started working with smartphones. And then we were always looking for a new addition to this Internet of Cameras, as we call it, which can bring something else to the game. So which can bring something more to the game, and which is complementary to the smartphone network that we have. And, the 360 camera was kind of, a no-brainer. And and right now, again, one of the biggest differentiators, you mentioned Hive Mapper, is that we're going beyond mapping. So the data that we're collecting with VX360 and some new data we're going to be collecting also with DriveN, it's very much focused on autonomous driving applications. So essentially making testing and validation in autonomous driving much faster, much more efficient, and much more cost effective. Yeah.
Gotcha. Could you talk a bit more about the demand side here? So who are the clients for this data, and what are they using it for?
So we have right now customers who are geospatial data aggregators, mapping companies, the guys who are quite large and they generate, let's say, map or navigation APIs for end users to use it, $1 billion revenue plus per year. And the reason these guys are large enough is that they rely on multiple sources of data to make sure that they have consistency over the period of time, right? So they use data from Natix. They might use data from 1,000 other sources as well, and they aggregate, fuse this data together, and they make sure that they have a high quality of service for their end users. So The original customer that we started with were map and navigation service providers and location or geospatial data aggregators. The new customer group that we are right now tackling for VX360 are autonomous driving companies and OEMs. So with OEMs, I mean car manufacturers like Honda, BMW, Mercedes-Benz. We can dig a little bit deeper because I think this is something that it doesn't exist today in Deepin, because the mapping side is people who are familiar with Hivemapper or us, our previous whatever we have been building, they will know what mapping is. But this testing and validation side from autonomous driving is a very, very new use case in Deepin. Nobody else is doing it yet. We're the first one that is launching. And yeah, the end customers are companies like Waymo, companies like Vabi, Wave, these autonomous driving companies that are building AI stack for full autonomy.
Yeah, so I think the autonomous vehicle use case is a massive opportunity. Could you go a bit more into how these companies are using AI and incorporating this mapping data to deliver a better product?
I think Ulrich would be a very good candidate to describe how scenario and validation is done and how it can be done with Natix in the future.
Yeah, and so I think we can also separate the data that we provide into two, let's say, different markets. One, for example, is if you take a state-of-the-art company working on autonomous driving, they typically rely on a so-called HD map, which is an accurate map with all the lane markings and curbstones and so on. And this is, let's say, this map provides to you the basically driving space, which would be available if there's no other road user on the roads. So, and these maps are typically generated by video images, which are taken, let's say, from planes flying all over the city, or also satellite images. But they cannot see what is written on a sign. So when we drive around, we can definitely read what is written on a sign, and we know where it is. And so we can add this information also to these type of companies, for example. Second point is, if you take a company working on autonomous driving, they make use of these HD maps, typically. And then based on these maps, they generate, let's say, a path on the road. And in addition, they need to get all the road users which are now on the road, and they get this information from the environmental sensors. But in order to train all this and to generate the right driving strategies for all these situations, you somehow have to develop the software and to test if the software actually does what you expect. So you're in the testing phase, or at the end of the day, also in the validation phase to make sure, yes, it works perfectly. And for doing all this, you cannot do it 100% in public traffic, because this will take very much time. You have to go to public traffic as well, but an important part of all this development work takes place in simulation. And typically, people develop these scenarios manually, which means you generate manually an intersection, you generate manually all the road users, the dependencies between the road users, and so on. And then you put your own virtual car in with your virtual sensor system, and you check if your sensor system is able to understand the environment in simulation. So, and the question is, how close is your manually developed scenario with respect to the real world? And with the help of the Natix community, we can generate these scenarios from public traffic, and we provide these scenarios for exactly the same simulation environment. But now the scenario really comes from public traffic. So on one hand, you don't need to waste your time in preparing these scenarios. On the other hand, you get immediately a lot of scenarios. Because if you send your own vehicles for collecting the data, then you wouldn't send hundreds of vehicles, because such a vehicle can easily be about 1 million euro or US dollar, just because of all the additional measurement systems. So you will never put 100 vehicles for checking out if your system works correctly. You will only put a few. And that means it takes very much time to collect the data, and then afterwards also to generate the ground truth information, which means this was the real situation. So, and all this is no problem in simulation. So the only question was, how can we bring to simulation the real world scenarios with a certain amount of scenarios, and this can easily be done with the community of Natix. And that's the interesting part of the story, which opens up a completely new business and which will increase significantly the speed and performance and quality in development of ADAS applications as well as autonomous driving.
Why did you guys settle on a deepen approach to building out this network? What disadvantages would a centralized model have?
We settled on a deepen approach because when we went and we started chatting with Ulrich about, a bunch of use cases and how to scale whatever we have built, we started realizing, that the efficiency of a token incentivized network to build that seed network to generate data with the cost that it has essentially for a startup our stage, you cannot get this in a centralized way. Again, even at the moment we are talking with giants of crowdsourced mapping, and they're also putting some dollar incentive, but it's not working very well for them, right? So it has shown that you can build a network very, very efficiently. You can coordinate a network very, very efficiently, right? So this is one of our lessons learned. And something very interesting also for autonomous driving, we're talking with, very large companies that, these are huge corporations working on AD stack for years right now. They basically told us sometimes we are very interested in targeted data collection. That means I want a data collection in certain types of roads in London, in New York, in Singapore. And, if you can deliver me that data, I'm going to pay a premium price for it because it's a pain point that I have, right? I don't want people, because if you, let's say you're Uber and you tap into your own network of cars, their job is to deliver passengers from point A to point B. Their job is not to do targeted mapping. You cannot ask them to do targeted mapping. That's not that's not why they sit in their cars for 8 hours a day. With a deepen approach, you can actually do that. We're not the only one that has shown that, but we have area-specific missions. Other projects have other incentive methods in order to, coordinate and mobilize your network into a certain area that you need. And this was another very, very interesting point for us. So it was a no-brainer that we wanted to do it the same model that we built DriveN. That was kind of the very kind of, That was a very simple decision for us, but details of it had to be a little bit different, or has to be a little bit different from DriveN, right? DriveN is a smartphone application. Retention and stickiness is very different from a set and forget hardware model that people are also paying a little bit money up front, right? So the incentivization or the emission and how you design your basically interaction approach with the user, it's a little different, Dylan, but the common denominator is the deepen part of it, or token incentivization.
How much work are you guys doing on the back end of the AI? Are you doing anything specific, or are you delivering this data to the end client?
We actually decided not to go too heavy on the post-processing of the data. A reason being, let's say for scenario simulation, you require, or for scenario generation, like what Ulrich was describing, you require very advanced AI to do object detection, trajectory. This is something that usually companies like Waymo have, and they have invested hundreds of millions of dollars to build these, models, essentially. So it would be kind of nonsense for Natix to be able to produce the output quality that then we can go and sell it to OEMs, right? So that's why we're partnering up with companies that have the AI stack for the post-processing of the data. We do add a little bit of value at the very end. So we do classification and things like that ourselves, but converting video data or the video data of the trips into let's say long format inside the simulation environment. This is something that we use post-processing partner. Even for mapping, we have the same. We're going to announce a couple of, larger, let's say, partnerships, but with larger players, that we're also going to, partner up with companies that have invested hundreds of millions of dollars into their stack, right? And we want to stick with our camera infrastructure and be a data curation network. That's kind of the step one, because we're very good at it, and this is the fastest way to monetize. But obviously, as we grow, we are going to build our own capabilities as well in order to, to further add value to the data and monetize.
Gotcha. I also want to ask, what lessons have you learned about incentivizing users to both join Natix and do any extra incentivization? I know you guys have like quests on your platform, obviously the tokens. Could you go a bit into that?
That's a super good question, Dylan. I tell other founders as well, like one of the lessons, for example, and I wish somebody would have told me this. So if you're a deep founder, food for thought or lessons learned at least by Natix might apply to your case as well. For example, one of the things that we saw very early on is that the incentivization model that you design for a smartphone is very different from a hardware that you sell to the end user for many reasons, especially hardwares that are set and forget. Smartphone has this little friction that you need to fight with the users, right? Every time a drive end user sits in their car, they need to remember to put the phone up and start mapping the world, versus with the set and forget hardware, you don't have that issue. You have many other issues, but you don't have this issue, right? So it's just one aspect of it. But smartphone gives you a scalability that no dash cam can actually give, essentially, because it's the gap between me and having a new user is just convincing them over a digital ad or over a Twitter post that they need to download it and use it. That's it. That's how I onboarded Node. It takes minutes. It doesn't have any kind of supply chain. It doesn't have any logistics, nothing. So incentivization was something that we had to work a lot on. And for example, with smartphones, we had stickiness and retention issues day one that we launched. And then we were like, okay, how can we try to gamify the system? How can we try to add more utility like navigation and dashcam? Because without these, the user, once the bear market hits, the user has zero incentive to actually use the app. Another one that was a very, very good learning was we started with smaller emissions and something called retrospective airdrops to the users that have been most active within our network. So that gave us, first of all, quite some time to identify which users have been, the longest lasting users and have shown to have contributed the most to the network. And then on the other side, what we realize is that when you give reward to such users who are your most active users, usually the tendency to just, cash out at the time of TGE is much less. So many of our users, what we saw as a behavior was they were actually long-term holders of the token. And, believe me, in our tokenomics design, we did many things to make sure that we give the most amount of incentive and token reward to the people who are long-term holders and believers of Natix, and vice versa. So if you're in it for the short run, then you shouldn't get much from us, right? And this is actually what we saw. Like we did also some social engagement campaigns and so on. And the shorter these campaigns were, the more sell pressure, I would say, you see at your TG or once you give the token. But the longer the engagement has been from a user, they stick around, which was very interesting learning. I have heard it from a couple of people that this is the right way to design your models, but I saw it with ourselves, actually, with numbers and with data.
Yeah, would love to go a bit deeper into the tokenomics. So what's the overall design and value accrual mechanism that you guys have developed, and why'd you settle on that?
So, on one side, we have the emission, which is, again, going to be different from DriveAnd and VX360 for the users. But the current way that DriveAnd at least works is we have monthly cycles. You compete in your regional local leaderboard. So if you're in the US, you compete in the US leaderboard. According to your leaderboard ranking, at the end of the month, you get a certain amount of Natix given to you. Top 60% get Natix. Next 30% get another in-app currency, not a cryptocurrency, in-app currency called gems. And the bottom 10% don't get anything. This was designed to increase the retention and stickiness of our user base. Then the way that you climb up the leaderboard is either you just drive and detect and you earn points. You can do missions, which are these quests essentially that you can do their time and location specific tasks. So drive, let's say, 2 days in the next 3 days in a row, or drive 10 kilometers in the next 24 hours, or, go map specifically this part of New York, this block in New York. You can also have these nitros. Again, this was to gamify the user experience. It's a period of 10 days. Any user can activate one. We don't sell the nitros or anything. And you can attach up to 30 of these missions to that nitro. It's for the user to feel that they can strategize. They have a way to maximize their earning and to play with it. With VX360 is going to be a little bit different. You asked me also for value accrual. It's rather simple. We're going to generate revenue from the data that we're monetizing, as well as other means that we have. For example, this marketplace that we have inside Dryvan. And from the protocol revenue that we generate, 40% of it would be buyback and burn. Another 35% would be going towards the stakers. So we have a deep staking platform that is being used. The people who stake will also participate in the system governance for voting. And then we have 25% that is being kept for R&D of the project. It's basically the cost of data monetization. Very similar model, I would say, to something like GeoNet has or similar project.
Awesome. If I can jump in with a quick question. So kind of building on the idea of revenue generation and value capture, when I'm thinking through like the autonomous vehicle use case that you've outlined, you kind of have the data collection where you're focused on, and then you have all these different parts that sit on top of that. So the pre-processing, creating those simulations, training of models, eventually that goes into the car, and then that car is sold on to the end user. It seems to me that like the actual data collection there probably, in terms of the entire stack, extracts a smaller amount percentage-wise of value compared to maybe other parts of the stack. I wonder, do you think that's true? And then does that mean that like the long-term vision, is there a long-term vision where you can just be a data collection company? Like a lot of crypto companies are going that route. You mentioned you want to move up the stack. Do you think that's something that's necessary to kind of reach a long-term sustainable business?
So regarding your first statement, and Ulrich, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not really true. We are talking with a lot of autonomous driving companies. We just had a conversation with one of the key players actually in the space, raised a lot of money, over $1 billion to build what they are building, and they have built so far. And they essentially told me something super interesting that, as an autonomous driving company, not even themselves, you need two things. You need compute, which is one of the challenges, right? And they're partnering up with guys like NVIDIA. NVIDIA is at the top of this list. And you need data. That's another component of building. No other company can do what they're doing in terms of autonomous driving without these two. And these are right now actually causing them, bottlenecks. This is with everyone in the industry, right? So we're not on the compute layer. NVIDIA is, because they need onboard chips, and also later on also for cloud, essentially for training and so on. So, but for the data, we are one of the key players. Look, there could be other players as well. So if you are having a fleet or something like that, obviously you can equip it with either you can make a deal and put certain sensors, or if you own a fleet, you can have an edge. If you're, let's say, Uber or Amazon or something like that, and if you find a way to equip your network of drivers with a certain hardware, then you can generate that data. But even then, you wouldn't do it as optimized as a deepened model. Now, regardless of Natix doing it or another company, that's my genuine opinion. And regarding the post-processing of the data, the way that we are doing it is not exactly like we just sell you the raw data and you do whatever you want to do with it. It's that we partner up with these guys, and they bring some of the value, we bring some of the value, which is data. And this is the current customers that we are having. And essentially we sell it together. We have our own channels to sell it. They have their own channels as well to sell it. And there's a partnership on this. There is a revenue sharing essentially on what is happening. So this is kind of like the current model that we see. Doesn't mean that we are the data provider, but what it means is that we just don't want to build something half-assed done just to show some prototypes to our community. We really want to monetize the data. We need a tech stack that requires hundreds of millions of dollars of investment, and that's why we're partnering up with the big guys that have this stack. And funnily, many of these big guys are also the customer of the end product that we're building together. So that's kind of the interesting thing that we're seeing.
Okay, that sounds good. So, like, if I were to summarize that, it's kind of in the autonomous vehicle world, there's a data shortage right now, without a doubt. You're working there to be able to provide that data in a meaningful way to those end users or to those end customers. Maybe one day that data shortage is solved, and then you can move on to bigger, whatever the next thing is, I guess, is the way I put it.
Correct. There is, AI needs data the same way that, I would really describe, especially with VX360, Natix is becoming very similar to what Grass is doing for large language models, generalistic large language models. We're doing it for also large language models, actually, for autonomous driving applications. And hopefully very, very soon, we're going to have one of the biggest open databases for autonomous driving data, for 360 video data.
Yeah, so we're seeing Waymo kind of being fully launched or mostly launched in San Francisco, having like a full robot taxi fleet. Do you see the market for Natix expanding as Waymo and other autonomous vehicle services start expanding throughout the US and globally?
Definitely. We are also sure that today, let's say, this is a starting point. So a starting point in terms of, it's clear this type of data is very useful right now, but the next step afterwards, we will definitely learn what this data can also be used for in addition, not just for autonomous vehicles. There can be also many more applications supporting blind people, for example, walking downtown, whatever. So there are a lot of future applications, but they are not so visible today because they are also not so well developed. And let's see how the next step looks like, where exactly the same data can be used for.
Yeah, one idea I've heard of is like smart cities. Obviously you need a lot of mapping data, visual data, camera data. How do you think Natix could potentially help fuel that use case?
In many ways, actually. It's, in my opinion, it's an easier version of what we're doing. But when we're talking, I think it needs to also become cheap enough. So the cities are the guys with the lowest budget. We used to sell to cities, right, and governments and so on. They are a very bad customer group. I'd be very honest with you. It's a very nice customer group to have, but they're a very difficult customer group. No VC wants to touch B2G as well. If you guys talk with VCs, it's usually what scares them the most because of the long sales cycle and low budgets that they have and so on. Of course, there are like outliers here, but this is typical. Like if you're working for a defense industry, then jackpot, you will have all the money that you need to have really, really large scale projects. One of the things that I think we need to see is, for example, price of compute, which should be cheap enough, so post-processing of the data, that the cities are willing to pay for that. So this is something quite important. But there are many use cases that we can cater for smart cities. I give you one that we're actually working on right now: detecting road distress, essentially detecting guardrails on the road. To have an inventory of all of these guardrails. Where does it start? Where does it end? We have really, really good partners that we're also talking to and kind of testing things with. And at the end of the day, I think the AI is there. The data is also there with Natix Network. It's just a question of, when you combine the AI that needs compute and the data, which requires some resources to cater it, would the end result be cheap enough for the end user to actually buy that? So a lot of use cases, as Ulrich said, might not be the use case for today, but, with the pace that everything is going with the, optimizations of AI and hopefully compute, which will get cheaper as the time goes on, I think it's just a matter of time that there would be a lot of smart city use cases unlocked. We're talking about, a lot of road distress was one use case. We can talk about, any kind of damages on the infrastructure that the city wants to automatically detect and process and monitor. Yeah. So, and this blind use case, I would also call it a part of smart city, because I think the probably governments want to subsidize such a thing. You guys might have seen this. This is not something crazy, but when you have your Google Maps and you lift off the phone and you have this kind of immersive navigation, which is through the lens of your camera, there's something called virtual positioning system. So it uses the camera. It basically does a matching between what the camera sees and this kind of 3D version of the world that you have in your database, which Natix can also provide the data that you need to build it. And essentially like a human brain, you recognize that you're here and therefore you have to go straight and then take a left. So they just do this in an immersive way. Now imagine doing this in a different way. So instead of visually showing it to an impaired person, you will just guide them through what they have to do. And you rely on certain onboard sensors. A couple of companies are actually doing this. But for you to be able to apply this virtual positioning system, you need the data that companies like Natix or Niantic is also quite big on this, actually. I don't know if you saw their announcement that, these crowdsource essentially data curation networks are generating, and then you build those virtual positioning systems as a byproduct of this data.
Yeah, another use case I wanted to ask you about, I saw you guys had a partnership with Daylight recently. I wonder if you could go a bit more into that and then how EVs can potentially use Natix.
Yeah, so the partnership with Daylight, we made this partnership because, behind closed doors, we told them that we were about to launch VX360, and a large portion of our user base is going to become EV owners, in this case Tesla, and we're also expanding to other vehicle brands as well. And I think it made a ton of sense. From data curation point of view, we haven't really found the use case, but it's a shared opportunity. For me, Dylan, this was my strategy since day one. If you look at our marketplace, I think that we are grabbing a lot of users, and like you, I'm very bullish on Deepen. I think if we can help our users to monetize different aspects of their life and contribute to something bigger, why not? We would like to do that. For me, it's not even like defocusing us from doing our main business. It's adding extra utility to your user base and making their life even better when you introduce them with other kind of models, data sharing, infrastructure sharing, and so on. So there is this very great match between our user base and Daylight. And that's why we're talking with Jason and we said, okay, it's perfect. We're going to integrate essentially Daylight into the app for VX360 driver companion app. And we're going to they're making it very easy via API and SDK for us to do that. And essentially a lot of our users can automatically also share their energy via the same platform. And I think this would be a big added value. Ideally, you're going to see more and more of these Deepen apps hopefully merging into one and not just shooting users to one another, but providing many functionalities from one app. We're not there yet, but I see that coming as this, let's say, Deepen app aggregator or whatnot.
Yeah, I think one of the big unlocks of blockchain and crypto is composability and interoperability. And you want to see a lot more of that in Deepen. Is Natix built on Solana, by the way?
Correct. The token is on Solana, and we are also using Peak for our machine ID, for example. So yeah, we're having a good world of both. At the moment, I think Peak is not live yet because their mainnet was not live, but it's going to go live very, very soon. So all of the devices within Natix will also have a Peak ID.
You spoke a little bit on the supply side in terms of who you're selling the data to. I'm wondering how your developments on the demand side are going. Is it mostly crypto natives? Are you onboarding like classic Web2 companies, maybe like Uber, things like that? Curious how that's going.
Very much with the focus on the latter. So since day one, we knew that we need to, from product development point of view as well, we need to have something that is for non-crypto people predominantly, because the population there is much, much larger. And there's a bigger portion of drivers, or even better, occupational drivers whom are on the road for 7-8 hours plus that are not necessarily crypto friendly. That's why we had to add these utilities since day one, navigation, dashcam. That's why we had to gamify. That's why we had to add a marketplace with non-crypto rewards and be able to onboard them and educate them towards crypto. So we have been very much onboarding our users, but if you ask me, and it's going to be the same for VX360. I think there's a much bigger number there. That's why VX360, one of our biggest focus areas was what would be the utility for the drivers. Because if earning is the only utility that people are getting your hardware for, there is no good in your hardware. It's a dead hardware. That's why we had to provide something that also Tesla doesn't today, which is record your entire trip. If you're an affiliate operator, for example, this is an amazing functionality for you as a driver, and then have that recordings as well as your Sentry mode on the cloud. Because today you can store it on a flash drive. It's not crazy. Tesla offers that already, but you need to unplug your flash drive and then go, because video file is usually, heavy. So yeah, that's why from day one, we had to think of utility. I think that's the most important, not utility for the token, but utility for the users of your product.
I was just going to ask about how you kind of think about building on underlying blockchains, what's most important to you, and how you come to those decisions.
I think, as a founder, we want to focus on our core business at the end of the day. And blockchain is a fundamental enabler of this core business because it's crypto incentivized, right? At the end of the day. And it's a trustless environment that we want to have. So there's no other way to go, in my opinion. It's just something is going to break. if you do it another way. But this is not the core of our business. So obviously we want to outsource this. We want to do partnerships with. And another element that is very important, and I'll be very honest, I think whichever founder tells you that this is not a factor, is for that blockchain to have the right community, right DeFi ecosystem, right, a lot of these things play a key role in you launching a successful business, because token is an important part of our business model, right? I think even the token price is an important stat. I'm very sad to say this. That's why founders love bear markets more than bull markets. I'd be very honest. If you ask founders that have been in the cycle for multiple ups and downs, they tell you we love the bear cycle because the noise is out. You just focus on building. You just focus on growing the business. When the noise is high, your focus is ultimately, of course, to an extent higher on your token as well, which I personally hate and a lot of founders that I've talked to hate. So to answer your question, I think these are the key things that a founder looks into when we want to outsource this blockchain question. Community is one, DeFi ecosystem is one, or DeFi, let's say, environment that they have. Liquidity is another one. And then technical components, right? So in case of Peak, they had these very easy deep-in components that, yes, we could have developed it. It would have been, a sprint or so from our side, but why should I waste a sprint? It's a monthly run rate of my company, and it doesn't make sense for me if I can just drag and drop a component from an existing enabler. So Solana has been our choice for the token because at the time, I think there was an unmatched community. There was an unmatched community of DeepIn as well as just general community. It has been very, very hot. And I think right now Peak is really growing, and we have been testing their deep-in components. It has worked very well. We did a couple of POCs before even we commit to them, and that's why we're also outsourcing the device ID and let's say the trust layer, or some of the trust layer of our apps to them, and then some of it is actually built on Solana at the moment. So we're very much multi-chain, if you wish to call us.
Have you encountered any challenges with being multi-chain, or has that been generally a good experience?
No, it comes with its own challenges. You ideally, not ideally, but of course, there is a little bit of feelings involved between the chains. But at the end of the day, we're their customers. I think I had a chat with Toli. I had a call with him actually some time ago, and he said, look, you guys are all our customers. We try not to treat you differently. We try to be nice to everyone. And, he's right. We're their customers in a way. All of these projects that are building on the chains, they're their customers. But it's very culty, every chain, right? I think you can see it too. Solana people are Solana people. Ethereum guys are always in fight with Solana people. I mean, it's always this a little bit of a kind of trash talk that is happening, which is cool and which is fun. But other than that, it has been very smooth for us, I believe.
Very cool. Yeah, just with the time we have, I was wondering if you could give us kind of your roadmap or milestones for 2025 and what you're basically planning on building.
Yeah, so the highlights of 2025 would be VX360 and autonomous driving. This would be something new added to the Natix family. And the reason that I say the highlight would be this is because I think it's going to be the shining star of Natix in terms of protocol revenue. We're focusing on something that we identified. I mean, Ulrich is really one of the key players when it comes to revenue. And since day one, we agreed on two words, a scalable revenue, not just revenue. So that's what we're trying to work hard on. And I think we're already in a very good stage with a lot of our conversations. Some of them are commercial negotiations that are happening, so we're closing a couple of larger clients and partners at the same time. Some of them are both partners and clients, which makes it even more attractive, in my opinion. And 2025 is going to be expanding the Natix ecosystem. And another thing that I would like to do is I would really like to take Natix from just an app towards an ecosystem, because the data that we are generating, there's so many cool things that can be done with this data, both in the realm of mapping as well as the autonomous driving. So I think opening up the door and enabling a lot of these scientists and researchers to play around with your data and build really, really cool applications, I think that is going to multifold the value of your network. And this is another thing that we are really, really looking into it. So grants essentially enabling a lot of these AI engineers to build with the data of Natix. And I think we're going to have one of the largest 360 data sets globally very, very soon. And yeah, I think DriveN is also a very complementary part of this because it enables us to collect data very cheaply and very, very effectively. So as Uli said, with a lot of components of, for example, HT maps, when we need traffic signs, I think DriveN app is a very efficient, cheap way of collecting data. And VX360 is high fidelity way of collecting data, which you cannot do with a smartphone or a dash cam.
So in terms of like socials or other resources to learn more about Natix, where would you direct listeners?
Yes, so the best source is our website and the blog section of our website, www.network, as well as our Twitter. The handle is Natix Network, one word essentially. So if you guys want to learn more or be updated about our latest news, just follow us on Twitter or drop in our website, or in case you want to be downloading the app, so become a user either via your smartphone or if you have a Tesla with the 4 cameras of your Tesla VX60, our website is the main source for that.
And when is the 360 launch again?
We're aiming, so the hardware is actually ready. We're not going to have, logistic issues with the hardware. We're finalizing the software component, which is actually a better thing for me because it's in our control and it's an easier thing for my team to make sure that we deliver on time. A short answer to your question, end of March, beginning of April, we want to ship the first batch of VX360. We're going to start the beta testing before that. So Dylan, Kinji, if you guys do own a Tesla, let me know. I'll send you guys a unit for beta testing as well.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks so much for coming on. I'm super excited about Natix and look out for the 360 release.
Thank you, Kinji.
Nice.